Welcome, Kristina. Thank you. Good to see you, James. Or glad you joined in. Kristina is a third culture poet and visual artist. She grew up in South Korea and elsewhere abroad, but she resides in Shanghai now. She's the author of Elijah Fed by Ravens, and a chapbook, Put a Comma in Front of a Person, winner of the Harbor Review Editors Prize. She has an MFA from the University of Arizona, and she's the recipient of several awards, the Tupelo Quarterly Inaugural Poetry Prize, Ruskin Art Club Poetry Award, and a finalist for the Common Prize. Her poetry has appeared in the Los Angeles Review, Blackbird, and Tupelo Quarterly. Thank you for being with us, Kristina.
Yes, thank you for having me, Sheryl, for inviting me to do this, and welcome to everybody. Minneapolis and the Twin Cities are on my heart, have been on my heart, and very, very beloved people in my life, including one of my best friends, live in Minneapolis. So I've been sort of very immersed in following all of the things that have been happening in the last few months and really holding space for that and wanting to sit in solidarity and support in as much of the ways that I can from being so far away. I felt very far away, but very connected at the same time. So I just thank you for providing this space for people to come together and write poetry in the middle of the day. I think about how important it is, especially in very turbulent and traumatic personal periods of time in our lives, but also collectively and communally in our life as a nation and, in the communities where we are, how important it is to continue to make art and to create things in resistance to the destructive forces that sort of feel like they're at work all around us. I think it's really, really important. And it is an essential spiritual practice and also an essential communal practice. And I really believe in the power of writing together. I think there's something very magical that happens when we get together with other people and we write and make art together in the same space. So I'm really excited for this session of making some art during lunch. So it is the middle of the night here, so I hope you will forgive me if I'm a little bit out of it because it's 1:20 in the morning where I am. So please forgive me for any nonsense that might come out of my mouth right now. Um, I have some prompts for us today that are inspired by a form that I use in my book, Elijah Fed by Ravens. I started writing this form in this form because I was interacting a lot with stories from the Old Testament, specifically the Elijah Fed by Ravens stories. That's the title that I stole and then used as an acrostic in my book. And then it became the title poem in my book and the title of the book and the collection itself. Um, I feel like the acrostic as a form is very accessible. It's often one of the first forms of poetry that little tiny kids are introduced to. All of us might have written an acrostic poem with our name down the left-hand margin of the page and, individual words that maybe summed up who we were as a person. That's sort of the most basic form. I like to think of these as sort of like acrostics on steroids or like amped up acrostics or something like that, because I think there is so much of a possibility of how to use them as a way to create a work. So I thought we could start by I could read some of mine from the book so you can kind of see how the form is working. I've had people tell me before, people in my poetry group when I was workshopping these poems with them. They didn't even realize that it was an acrostic. They were just like, wow, your line breaks are really interesting and irregular, and I was like, well, it's an acrostic. If you look down the left-hand margin, it spells like a phrase or a word, and they were like, oh my gosh, they didn't even notice that. So I think that is also potentially one of the goals, is that the acrostic doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't feel like it's getting in the way of the poem. The poem is still a strong poem on its own. You're not forcing or like shoehorning any words in just to get that letter at the front. But my hope is that it will sort of allow for a reaching for maybe a more interesting word or interesting phrase, because you have to use that next letter of the alphabet at some point. I find it very helpful generatively. So we'll take a look at some of those together. So welcome. I hope you're ready to do a little bit of writing, and we can dive right in so we can have more time to write. So I'm going to share my screens and look at you guys can see what I'm using.
You hit record.
Okay.
Okay. You've got the power. You've got the power.
Okay. So can you guys see the poem up on the screen?
Yes. It's up there.
Is it working? Okay, I just want to make sure it was working. Great. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'll read a few poems from my book, so you can kind of just let them wash over you, but the words are on the screen. So if you want to see how the acrostic form, it's hard to hear it because when you're just hearing it, obviously you're not necessarily paying attention to where the lines are broken. But you can kind of see how it looks down the left-hand margin of the page. So this one, I'll start with quite a long one first, and then I'll read some short ones as well, and you can see some of the ways that I use this in my collection. And then hopefully you can write yourself. So this poem is called Horeb, Mountain of the Lord. And if you look down the left-hand margin of the page, you can see that, it spells HOREBMOUNTAIN all the way down the left-hand margin. So the poem, whatever poem you write, depending on what phrase you choose to use as your acrostic, your poem would have that many lines, because that's so don't pick a phrase that's too long, otherwise your poem will be very, very long. Horeb, Mountain of the Lord, 1 Kings 19, 9 through 13. How many times can we pass by? Open years, Elijah, into the day before the crows, your own Red Creek bottom, dry stone fears that you can't hear us. Elijah, wait with your back to the hurricane. We are moved to what burns you. Oh, get your head out from under the rock. Note small differences in temperature, the hair on your arms, seismic, standing up again like it did the last time. Isn't there always a last time? Note the way the air stills and the ravens become contemplative, what they question, how they know us, Elijah. They have reached into their tiny minds and have bowed down already, ever dark, even on this forsaken and holy transom. Here we are. Why are we still here? Eat this whisper, a wafer of our kindness. Lean your lobe over and place it on the ground. It is best to reach back into the vacuum and shut off your own devices, black them out until you are melted down, tucked in, eager, ready to be threaded out, taken once again into our palms. Who better than Elijah to be consoled here and now? He runs away and whines, lists all the ways we've failed him. Inches closer and closer to the edge of the cliff. Just cloak, just feathers, such a minuscule human ear. So you can see with this poem, I'm taking imagery and language from the story that is sort of like the source text and is referenced in the acrostic, and sort of giving my own voice. In this case, this is sort of the collective voice of God speaking to Elijah, speaking back to Elijah, speaking about Elijah, and applying my own imagination to that circumstance of Elijah in the on the mountain of the Lord. Okay, let's look at another one. So this is the title poem in the book, and it comes pretty early in the book. And it takes place when Elijah is still in the cave hiding from the queen. And now, Elijah fed by ravens. Even the whisper leaves the black feathers inchoate. Rustled, jump leap, gathering another stick, a hope caught there under first scuffle. Feathered eyes, feather sore, the days waiting, days gone. Before the raven comes, yawn and brook the tiniest releve of pebble. Ave, anger sifts, shift, no vapor of it left. Elijah opens, nocturne of hunger, a secondary mouth. This one, the next one is the widow at Zarephath, and from 1 Kings 17. This one you can also see, I think there's a couple examples of this. There's one more I'll read later that the lines are a little bit longer and they sort of try to sort of pushing into the story a little bit in terms of questioning bigger ideas that I, as the poet, are kind of interested in exploring using the voice of the widow in this case, or the voice of someone else in the next poem. So you can kind of see how that's working. The widow at Zarephath, 1 Kings 17 through 24. Then he asked, so I gave. He said we would be blessed because his words were earning the Lord's keep. Outside a wasted land, baked, idiomatic as a sunset. Slowly drying up, my boy. I want a boy ornery and restless as a snake. Elijah, the prophet, full, fed, but even after his blessing, my boy's windows shut hard with a stone. I begged, so for us he made death this time an alibi. A wafer taken back from the mouth, palmed halfway into tasteless mush. This house would have been over. 0. I hungered for a return. Elijah is a man and thus allowed to wander, arrive in the nick of time. Red, what comes after that nick? Emancipated now, my boy's flesh is pinked up like a big fire peach, a mother's relief. Now I am left to hazard his inevitable second death, adventure with survivor's guilt. I stir it into the starter, sugar into yeasty foam, tinker with how it flavors what we'll be tasting. We're alive. Hallelujah clings bitter to the teeth, tinged with all that stays dead. People are profitless margins, read into the blanks between the lines. Just read a few more, just so you can continue to get a little bit of the idea, and then we'll start writing. To heaven in a whirlwind. This one's about Elijah getting swirled up into heaven. To heaven in a whirlwind. 2 Kings 2:11 through 12. Enough of fire, of pseudo-prophet or fakey priest. I've kept lists of what was lost, years where people must have dug wells iridescent under a heavy-handed heat. Some families have too many jars remain empty, children still. I wonder again if praying 3 or 7 times will be enough. Measure, lacking, bow slowly, how heavy, Can we fault the ones who turn knives from their rib cage to the tree, carve, then set the tall Asherah poles up? Their mouths are also caked after years of not even a drop of dew. Ask, ask again. Now ask again. Their king did the evil. The eye of the Lord is snapped tight. None of them see heaven coming, even while flames scorch eyebrows, wheel wells blink through golden dusk. Whirlwind upends dead stalks, chaff-blind people peer out of their huts, while his shadow man, Elisha, refuses again to leave his side. Be quiet. Elijah is rolling up his cloak to open the river like a zipper, keep his and his successors' feet dry. How these things could have actually happened is beside the point. Some eye gleamed over a candle and wrote this version of the story down. A double portion, that's what Elijah asks for. Caveat, he'll only get it if, let's veer back to the road ash-coated from the recent chariot's fire, where the shape of the man used to be. Whose prophet, Elijah? Why you, not them, not me? Even Elisha asked, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? From the epicenter of his grief. Now tell me, how does his question, unlike those who came before and mine which come after, end in a double blessing, not in a test or a crispy pyre, not in his own dead blood? Okay, and then I just wanted to show a couple more that are a little bit shorter that don't use a whole phrase of the poem. All of these poems are in my book, so if you are interested, you can get one and then you can read them, spend a little bit more time with them. But this one is about the birth of Christ. It's called Anticipation. Anticipation. Angels dusty in near morning, titmouse under tender straw, pebbled light, and inside her body a calm broke. She anticipates incandescent blood drying on her thighs. Paper thin, the space between his skin and hers, she reads all the answers in the black stones of his eyes. Shifted now, she takes him closer, inhales the tang of God, this normal girl in normal human bark. And then the last one is a poem called Agnes Day. Agnes Day, a caught hoof who takes away my shame. Gamey bit of fluff flicked into spark, lighting a survivor's fire. You are never lost. I am heard. Mote, member, being, among, one of, belong to me, to us, in our unbelief. Some songs sing themselves. Deeper in the cave, now I'll listen for your softest bleats. I am eager, and I hope you can hear me. So I hope you get a little bit of a sense of the possibilities of the form, both kind of short versions where you might pick a word or something that's compelling to you and then write that as the acrostic. So feel free to not use any of the kind of suggested text I'm going to give you right now and just pick a word that's compelling to you that you might want to write into as your acrostic. Um, uh, this prompt, like I mentioned before, I think has so many possibilities in terms of the structure that it provides to generating a poem. We're going to read, there's some packets that Sheryl made for you guys that are with some passages that might be interesting to you. So the prompt is to read the passage Water from the Rock from Exodus 17, 1-7. If this one is not vibing with you, there are some alternative options later that are at the end of the packet. Think about some of the images in this text that stick out to you. but also what might be in the story, but not in the text. So as we apply our own reading and our own human experience to the characters or to the situation, other things that are from our own experience might infuse story with something else, some other idea or some other perspective on what might be happening. So think about what might be in the story, but not in the text. So like the widow one, I'm a mother. I have 3 kids. And so when I was reading that poem, like thinking about that story from the mother's perspective, you know, um, really infused that story with a different kind of meaning for me that I was trying to bring into the poem. So, what associations, images, understandings do you, from your own life experience, have that you can bring into the story via the vehicle of your imagination? And then, after you read the story, use some line from the story, or in this case, we can use the title of this passage. This passage is taken from the New International Version. And then use that title as arrange those letters down the left-hand margin of your page. So normally when I'm writing an acrostic, I will go ahead and just write the letters down the left-hand margin like this. And I still give myself the freedom to break my stanzas wherever I want, but I know that all of my lines are going to start with these letters because I want to preserve that. If you happen to have a very, very long line, like you can see in this poem, in this poem here, I have some long lines, and I indent the line to make sure I can still preserve the acrostic. So if you have some other things poetically you want to do, you can kind of give yourself the freedom to do that. Okay. So the only rule is that every line must start with the letters so that you have it spells something down the left-hand margin. So I thought we could write together for about 15 minutes and then we'll have an opportunity to share. So the story is right here. Maybe if we could do this one, I'll just read it out loud. Although it's in the packet. So this one's pretty short. So I might just read this one out loud. And then if people want to do the other ones, they can read those on their own. So this is Water from the Rock. And this features Moses. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massa and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So when I read this, I can see so many possibilities in terms of whose voice I might want to speak from. Maybe I want to speak from Moses's voice. I want the I in my poem to be Moses. Maybe I want to speak from the rock's voice. Maybe I want to speak from the Israelites' voice or an individual Israelite imagined in this kind of group of Israelites that are complaining. Maybe I want to speak in the voice of God. Maybe I want to speak in the voice of the desert, um, uh, a voice, the desert of sin speaking. I have choices to make. In a poem, there is always a voice speaking. So that's kind of the first initial choice that you have to make when you're writing something. And I would just say go with your guts on this, whatever sort of interesting point of view you want to inhabit, go with it. And then your first line just has to start with W. There you go. All right. we can write for about 15 minutes. I think that will be perfect. And then if you're interested in doing any other passages, I have a few others listed here and they should be in the packet. I attached the passage from the NIV, so you can kind of take a look if any of the other ones seem more compelling to you, like crossing the sea from Exodus 15, or the widow's olive oil, or the Shunammite's son restored to life. For this one, if you are interested in doing that one, I would recommend taking like just a piece of the title, like just use restored to life or the Shunammite's son as my lines, so your poem wouldn't be super, super long. Okay. All right, we're going to write for 15 minutes. I'll leave this passage up on the screen so you guys can see it. And then we'll go. All right.
When we come back together, could you say something about how you have obviously a command of the scriptures and how you got that? Because you're obviously not only coming at this as a poet, but as a person who understands these texts. So when you come
Yeah. Would that be helpful to talk about now before you start writing, or do you want me to speak about it at the end?
does it interrupt people to have her talk about that?
I'm curious.
I can save it for the end. I think I can save it for the end.
I had that thought too.
I'm like,
I'm impressed.
I'm like, what seminary did you go to?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so kind.
Oh.
That's very kind. I feel very honored. Yeah, I don't know if I can really answer that question other than just but let me think about it while you guys are writing and while I'm writing, and then I'll try to speak on it at the end.
Journey is
Perfect.
in the stories. So
I'm gonna set a timer so we don't go beyond. I'm gonna give us
15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it about 15 minutes. So go with your gut, and I would say just try to say yes to yourself right now, even if it seems ridiculous and strange and weird, and just go for it. Just try. Yes.
We are done.
Ooh, amazing. You got 5 minutes early. You had 5 more minutes.
We have 5 minutes before one of our people has to go to a meeting. So
Oh, okay, perfect.
But-
Perfect. Amazing. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see everybody a little bit better. Okay, so let's do a little sharing. I am not done. I still had 4 lines to go, but that's okay. I don't want to share. I already shared a bunch of stuff. So I would love to hear what you guys wrote. If anybody would be willing to be the first brave soul to offer up their gift of generosity of their draft. We're all gonna receive it with generosity as well, because we know that we all just wrote these in 10 minutes. So they're very much a first draft, a first attempt. And then you can spend many, many months tinkering with yours, like I did with mine, to infuse them with even more meaning and maybe even more layers. That's the beauty of to me, that's the beauty of poetry specifically as like an art form, because you can write a draft in 10 minutes. It's very different from, writing prose or writing a novel, which takes many, 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 many months to complete. I love that you can write a draft of a poem in 10 minutes and then you can tinker with it for a year. That's what I do. Yeah. So, okay, let's hear. Who would like to go first? Anybody?
I guess I'll go first since I'm the one who has to leave.
Okay.
This is Dr. Savia Tanis, aka Justin.
Okay, cool. I can see just your little body in the tiny screen on the left, but I can't see your face. So hello.
The camera will focus in a second.
Okay. So there's something about this passage that has always annoyed me, so I think you'll hear it in this.
Yes, perfect. I love that. Wonderful.
What in the world were you thinking? Asked the people of Israel to Moses, bringing us out into the desert with no plan for water? This is not an unreasonable desire, that we eke out enough water to meet the barest requirements of our children, our livestock, ourselves. For we did not flee slavery only to seek death. This is not some romantic notion of liberation, but a fervent quest for life. Our
Hmm.
children whimper, these animals cry out, mouths parched. They grow weaker day by day, hour by hour, as the hot sun blares down upon our fragile bodies and the earth remains dry. Will others find the remnants of our bodies, our tents, our children's toys, our livestock's trappings? Or will they find God's people and creatures flourishing? Come on, Moses. It's not unreasonable that we long to stay alive. We know God hears you, has saved us before. Do something.
Hey,
Wonderful.
yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, the image of the question at the end with, the people, the sort of collective voice of the people wondering what things are going to be found in the desert that are left after they perish there, having followed him into this dry, wasted place. That's very striking, the image at the end. I mean, I think it like gets at the heart of what the people would be wondering, like I think one thing that I think I'm noticing about and reflecting on even in my own practice from your poem is that I think this this act of kind of getting into the story in this way, I think it invites a lot of empathy into the equation when we read these things. Like I think sometimes for me, when I've read these kind of stories in my own upbringing and my own childhood, it's easy to sort of approach like the Israelites complaining, like it's sort of pitched as being like
Yeah.
in a judgmental stance, like, oh,
Yeah.
we judge them. Why did you complain? Why don't you trust God? And in my own investigation of like the stories of Elijah and these prophets, these sort of great men of God that we've been taught to like celebrate and sort of elevate to this, you kind of forget that some of the other people in the stories, they're people. Like I connect with them when I do this kind of activity. I want to speak from their voice because it's my voice. I would be in the same position. I'd be like, what the heck, man? I'm thirsty, give me some water, solve the problem. And I think like I wrote from the perspective of the Israelites as well, sort of from that empathetic point of view. So I think it's so cool. Oh, there's our timer going off for ending our writing. Thank you so much for being willing to share your poem first. That was really beautiful. And I hope you feel sort of a cathartic feeling having written that. You said, as if something's always bothered me about this story. I'm like, write an acrostic about it. It'll really help you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. I'm so sorry I can't stay, but
Oh, no, it's okay. Nice to meet you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
thank you. You too.
Okay, who else wants to share?
I'll share.
T-Will.
Sure.
Okay.
This is T. Michael. Hi. This is really fun. Thank you. Um, Wading through the desert amidst hunger and thirst, Moses feels the scorn and enters into a story of restoration and repair. For a people who have forgotten return to their land, people have forgotten the promise of return to their land, their God, if only they could trust Moses to lead them imperfectly and with humility. Will they ever learn to trust and thus return to God? Or will it take some crazy miracle like kicking a rock in order for them to find living water?
Ooh, I love the K. I love the K at the end, the kick, the crazy miracle and the kicking the rock. That's like a real punch at the end of that poem. I also I love the kind of transformation of the striking of the rock with this staff that sort of represents so much in the story to this sort of contemporary euphemistic kicking a rock. Like all that's contained within that phrase and that image is so interesting, I think, when it's put in the context of this story. Because kicking the rock implies like futility and or like leisure or play. You kick a rock when you're bored, or you kick a rock and nothing happens. It's kind of this useless activity. So to think about that in the context of this story, where we kind of know what's going to happen, like he's going to strike the rock and water is going to pour forth, but I always think about with these kind of things, like they didn't know. So I think like we can contain that that unknowing inside of our own poems as we approach the text with sort of this kind of eye, and a different kind of ear. So really successful, I think, in terms of the way that acrostic might have pushed you to that language in a way that you wouldn't have maybe reached for that in your own, maybe on your own, if you were just writing a poem about this story. So that to me is the power of the form and the acrostic. It sort of pushes you outside of your own linguistic boundaries to reach for something that might spark something that's a lot more interesting than you could come up with if you were just, drafting a free verse poem about this story. So very successful. Cool. Thank you for
No,
sharing.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mine is really dark, but I'll go for it.
No, I read mine. They're pretty dark. That's okay. We're not afraid of the dark over here.
Why did you bring us into the desert only to abandon us? Tear the skin from our bones, our children eaten from the inside out.
Oh, wait, sorry. Can I stop you real quick? I can't hear something with the sound is glitching, so I can't hear you very well. I really want to be able to hear all the lines of the poem. Oh, it might be my own internet that's unstable. I do live in
No,
China. So,
just pass a little farther away from the microphone. So
okay.
it's not going to help to look at
Oh.
your.
Why don't you just move over?
Yeah. The microphone's here in this machine.
Is that the
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Why did you bring us into the desert only to abandon us? Tear the skin from our bones, our children eaten from the inside out. Remind us again of why we trusted you. Faced with unutterable horror, raped and left for dead, we beg you, open your heart and your hands to make us whole again. Take this burden from our failing arms, heal our bodies, renew our spirits, even as we fall into despair. Remember your promise, our rock and our redeemer. Carry us in your arms and let kindness flow over us at last.
Nice.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Ooh, the line that's kind of popping out to me is the kind of call forward to the Jesus as the rock, and then this rock. I think that is really jumping out at me as a really interesting moment in the poem. And then the word kindness at the end, I think, is really also very, very compelling. And kindness flowing, right? Like water. I love that. Really, really beautiful. Thank you.
I'm willing to do mine. If there's time.
I haven't
Okay.
finished, so go
Okay.
ahead.
I think this is kind of like a prayer from the people.
Okay.
I wanted to write from the rocks, but I didn't quite get there. What
Ooh,
is
but maybe
happening?
next time. You can do that next draft.
I'll do that later today.
Yeah.
What is happening? A jarring series of events. The quarreling is so tiresome. Everyone is edgy, frightened, upset. Rays of hope, slivers of a future are hidden. Fear surrounds us on all sides. Redeem us, O God. Make a way through. Help us to find hope, especially as we wait and watch. Redemption seems elusive. O God of Moses, clear the way. Provide a pathway forward, and kindness and goodness forevermore. Kindness, yeah, I wasn't sure what. I wanted to know if you use a thesaurus when you do this, because I was like, I want a K word, but I can't think of
Yeah.
it.
Well, I think in that case, like, that's a great question. And I think that's like a more of a poetics question, now that you have a first draft, you can go back through because sometimes it's easier when you're in your first draft to reach for sort of a placeholder phrase. And maybe you're going, you know what, maybe that's a little too cliche or that's a little too expected. On my next draft, I'm going to try to sort of maybe immerse myself even more in the imagery and try to pull from the imagery, whether it's like imagery that's evoked by the idea of being in the desert, so like I ended up having a line that's like, my second line of my poem is all of us crack-lipped and bleeding, so like the idea of, trying to evoke through the imagery of these cracked lips, the sort of like feeling of what it's like to be in that situation. So I think like as we revise, we can invite ourselves to be even more inventive or creative with our language. And if that means trying to expand our, repertoire of K words that might be compelling, you absolutely could do that. I would say like my Elijah Fed by Ravens poem, I have a couple words in there that I added upon revision. So inchoate is one of them, and then releve. So I was like, ooh, I want something that evokes this sort of like movement of a brook or movement of a stream. And I didn't really, that word was not in my kind of like working vocabulary. But I found it somehow in my revision process. It was like, what can I use here? And then absolutely you can bring it in. So I think like if you're kind of feeling like that, because there are actually, K is a hard word to
Yeah.
like, or a hard letter for this. So I think going to a thesaurus and kind of just looking through and seeing, ooh, like what's lighting up my fancy here and what works, like that's a great strategy to use as you revise your poem. And I love, like for me, your poem, the real like impulse towards the prayer, like, okay, this is like a prayer. And that sort of, to me, in the story connects with the idea of Moses sort of praying on behalf of these people that he is also leading. He's led into this space, so the prayer being this sort of collective manifestation of, and crying out. The idea of crying out in the wilderness, is also a bigger kind of theme across the scriptures. So I think it sort of connects with that. And then you can kind of punch it up with your word choice, with the imagery, with the sort of way that the images are kind of coming into that prayer from the heart of the person that's speaking to God in your heart. So yeah, so as all of us go back and revise, there's so many possibilities and might be things that are glitching or you might want to replace with something else. And then you can still keep the integrity of the, of the acrostic, but you can be a little bit more playful in how you maybe return now that you even give yourself time to think about it, right? This is just the first draft. So there's so
Yeah.
many possibilities beyond this. Or maybe you decide, what if the rock was praying? And then you're like, ooh, like that's kind of interesting too. Like the voice of the rock is actually praying on behalf. And then that invites a different kind of voice and a different kind of language into what you're
Yeah.
doing. And that also is like very biblical, like the rocks cry out, like that's like a theme, a concept from
Right.
other scriptures. So I also really love when and like I said, I'm not a theologian, so I don't have like you know, a degree or credential to like back this up other than my lived experience as sort of a person who grew up in a Christian home, reading these stories and being exposed to these stories. And then as an adult, sort of applying my artistic mind and my artistic eye to my poetic practice, my spiritual practice, sort of melding those together. But I think there's so many things. I love when there can be these sort of echoes and calling backs and connections. Um, and I think that's why like I feel so honored and like loved as an artist when people can see what I'm trying to do in my poems in a way that maybe people who don't have that kind of like vision and framework and their own like depth of knowledge or study of the Bible might miss some of that stuff. It doesn't mean they can't access the poems in other ways, because I think the
Right.
image can stand in the gap for that. But I feel like, you guys sort of see what I'm trying to do in a way that is maybe different than like someone who might not have that kind of framework or context. So I feel very honored by that. You get the little like it's almost like it's not inside jokes, but it's like insider, knowledge, you're like, oh, okay, the yeast, she's stirring it in with the yeast. Like, that's really interesting because there was only like one little spoon of yeast left and she made bread for him and da, 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 those types of things. So I think that's really fun. And it's as a reader, it's very gratifying to you when you kind of can come to the poem and see what the poet might be doing. And so you as a poet, you can do that too with your work, you know. have those kind of echoes and callbacks and, you know, alternative images that are kind of giving life to the voice that's speaking and the, you know, the content that you're exploring in the poem. Yeah, so very, very cool. I really encourage you to try to keep, you know, keep fiddling with it now. Hopefully you'll get a little obsessed like me, and then you'll be like, oh my gosh, the K words, you'll be like thinking of and then eventually it's going to strike you at home and you're going to be like, yes, that's my last line, you know, like that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
If I could add on to what you just said. Hi, Christina. It's so good to see you. I
See
can't
you.
believe you're up at now 3 a.m. With us. Sorry, I was running from class and then heating up food, so sorry I'm just now on
Yeah,
camera.
no worries, no
But
worries.
when you lectured to my class, you used this, you articulated this practice as a way to inhabit the
Mhm.
story. And
Yes.
I thought that is like, that's such a beautiful framework for thinking about the kinds of invitations and
Mhm.
permissions that this practice invites. And like you invited us to do that when you said, here's all of your potential options for the voices that you might inhabit as you write this. And there are more. And
Yes.
so I really, I love that kind of invitation for us as like readers and interpreters
Mhm.
because it allows us to access and engage with story in a different way that doesn't need to be entirely cerebral or
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
fixated on like the meaning or the best way to
Mhm.
interpret or understand this story. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate what you offer in that way
Thank
with
you.
this.
I really feel like it's been powerful for me, because I think we contain, like, I love that you said, you know, it's different than the cerebral. It's different than the cerebral. Like I think the thing that poetry gives to this, and maybe this is something helpful for anybody who's like trying to work with these texts in any capacity to remember, is that images live in our body, like they live in our senses. So anything that's activating our sense experience in our bodies is in our bodies. Like that's how we actually create information that's going into somebody else's brain, is through imagery. We make them understand it. And the thing that's hard about the Bible or hard about spiritual texts is that they tend to be very abstract. And the abstract can't live in our body. We actually don't know what it means. Like when you say kindness or when you say hope or when you say healing, like these are all abstract concepts, and we have to give them life in the body through the image in order for someone else to really understand. So I think one reason why this is so powerful as a kind of spiritual practice, as a tool, is that it gets us in our bodies and thinking in our bodies, in our senses. And then it's almost like we're making something that can then translate this thing that might be kind of abstract to someone else. And we are always talking about these abstract ideas like sustenance and survival and doubt and things that are very complicated and complex, but in giving them a voice, in giving them a body in the story and inhabiting the story, um, we are able to kind of like convey something to someone else in a way that I feel like is very powerful because it's grounded in images which are grounded in our body and in our lived experience. So for me, that invites empathy, that invites imagination, that invites a different perspective, that invites all of those things as we inhabit the story, and kind of see through the eyes of these people that we're kind of reading about in a more distant, in a more distant way. So for me, it's very powerful because it helps me understand what I'm reading in a different way. And then if somebody else can understand something as a result of it, that's, you know, even better. But for me personally, it starts with a very kind of like personal desire to kind of find some way to connect with this thing that maybe I've read 100 times, you know, and only maybe understood very on the very surface. So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. And I think, because again, it's such an honor to be able to kind of enter this space as like a lay person, and like just share my own practice. I hope it is useful. And I think I think it is. And I hope it's accessible. I want it to be accessible to all. all who want to try, you know.
We have students of many different faith beginnings and where they are now, and I like the fact that this process relates across all sacred texts and
Yes.
stories to reimagine them in from a different perspective other than the one that we hear over and over and over and
Right.
over. And
Yes.
visiting those stories, those words from the rock, from the water, from the desert. I mean, expands our understanding and how we can internalize those words in a different way.
For sure, for sure. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for writing with me
So much.
See you, Jen.
today.
Get some rest now.
I will. I'm gonna try. I'm like kind of buzzing right now, so I'm hoping I can like fall back asleep. But anyway, it's been such an honor and such a blessing.
Oh, so grateful.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kristina. Very good to see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Jen. Good to see you too. Bye, everyone.